Welcome to the Palestine Church audio podcast. We hope you enjoy this message by Pastor James Warren. For more great content and updates from Palestine Church, please visit us at palestinechurch.com.
And this act of worship that we see here in Mark 14 and in John chapter 12 is this beautiful picture of what it looks like to be, just as we were singing, absolutely surrendered to the Lord, and to be so in a moment with Him that He is the only one that you see, that His presence is the only thing that matters. How many houses and rooms have we walked into and Jesus has been there and we see everything else but Him? How many times have we walked so quickly through life that we never stop for one moment to notice the beauty of what Jesus has done and who He is? You know, as Ricky was just painting this beautiful picture, I mean, God, the separation between us and God has been completely torn. And which means what? It means that God He's everywhere. And He's probably always been everywhere, but we're coming into this awareness and this realization that God He's everywhere. And it's like the psalmist said, he said, I can make my bed in hell. In the worst of place that you can imagine, the place where you say, that's where God would never go. And there He is. Now, a word to the wise, I don't think you need to go to hell to find out that God's there. I'm just saying, don't run your life into the ground just to find out that God's presence is there, but it's there. In your lowest moment, in your weakest moment, you will find that the presence of God is there, and He's there to be seen and noticed by those who can slow down enough, who can stop for a moment on the side of this race called life and just look out and say, wow, here you are. You know, in this story, one of the things that really stands out to me is, okay, Jesus is there. There's several people in the house. You've got Jesus. And in John chapter 12, it gives us some more details that Mary, Martha, you guys know Mary, Martha, and Lazarus were all there. And they're reclining at the table. What was Martha doing? She was serving. That's what it says in John chapter 12, okay? Come on. Martha was doing what Martha does. She was serving. And they were lounging about the table. And in John 12, it says that Mary comes in with this flask, which is like a jar of perfume, expensive perfume. I mean, a year's salary in this bottle of perfume. And I love Mark's account of it because it says that she broke that open. She broke it open and she began to pour it on Jesus, and she began to anoint Him. And the fragrance of that perfume began to fill the room. And the disciples, and in John 12 it says that Judas was the one who, he got mad about this. He said, this is a year's salary. Do you know how many poor people we could have fed? And I love John's account because he says, well, Judas had other motives in his heart. There was something else going on there. But he said a good thing. Hey, we could use this to serve poor people. And Jesus said, stop right there. Because what this woman is doing to me is a beautiful thing. This extravagant act of worship is actually a beautiful thing. And from now on, guys, think of this. From now on, people are going to be talking about what this woman did on this day. Thousands of years later, in Palestine, Texas, on January, what is today? 19th, there's a group of people talking about this extravagant act of worship. And I know, here's the tendency when we're reading this story. Everybody in this room thinks that they're Mary. But sometimes we're not Mary. In the story, many times we're the disciples in this story. The followers of Jesus. They're in the room with Him. But they missed the moment of what God was wanting done to His Son, Jesus. Maybe want to be the Mary in the story, but many times we're the Martha or we're the disciples, and we are doing something else than engaging with the most important thing. What I've learned in I just turned 32 this past week, so my 32 years of life, is that worship, the heart of worship, that each one of us was created to be and to live. And Ricky has the most amazing teaching on this. It's on our podcast somewhere. We'll upload it this week to remind you about how even in Genesis chapter 1, we were created to be people of worship. And we worship him, not just a service, not just coming together, although these are important, but with everything that we do, every word that comes out of our mouth, every act of our hand can be worship to him. Can be worship to him. And so many times we get in this place where Jesus is in the moment. He's in the room. He's in the house. But we have a hard time discerning that he's there and what his worth really is. Worship comes from this place. It's in some ways it's very simple. If you see him, it will elicit a response from you to worship him. The importance is just to see Jesus. And I'll give you this definition, another definition by John Piper this morning. So the inner essence of worship is to know God truly and then respond from a heart to that knowledge by valuing God, by treasuring God, by prizing God, by enjoying God, by being satisfied with God above all earthly things. And then that deep, restful, joyful satisfaction in God overflows in a demonstration of acts of praise from our lips and acts of love in the service for the sake of Christ. Worship is not something that we really do, that we work to do, that we strive to do, that we need to worship better. And if you're hearing this message this morning and you think, hey, the pastor's telling us to worship harder, worship stronger, worship longer, it's like you're missing the whole point. Worship is really just a response to the awe. It's our awe of who he is. And so when you see Jesus for who he is, our response is to worship him. It is to love him. It's not us trying to love and worship him, but Mary captures this, that it is a response of seeing him. And I don't believe I'm reading or adding into the text here, but I believe that something happened like this as Jesus was sitting around his disciples, that Mary just began to look at Jesus. And she just began to think, this is the one. This is the one who's going to rescue us. This is the one who's going to be our Savior. He's been telling us. She had been around Jesus. She had heard him say, hey, guys, I'm going to the cross. And 3 days later, I'm going to be risen from the graves. And she's looking and she's going, he's the one. He's our Savior. He's the one. And just out of that view of Jesus and who he was, she was compelled to just go over there and do this extravagant act of love and worship for him. And sadly, the disciples were standing there, and it wasn't in their rhythm. It wasn't in their expectation for how Jesus was supposed to be worshiped. And you got to think, I think we can relate to this a lot. Think of growing up in Jewish culture during that time. I mean, every feast, every celebration, it's on the calendar. This is the moment that we're thanking God for this. This is the moment that we're celebrating this. This is the moment that we're remembering when God is set, like think of the Passover. It's like, okay, we know. And it's like kind of in a East Texas church culture, we know, hey, Sunday morning, 10 a.m. Okay, this is the moment when we're going to come together and we're going to worship. Okay, Wednesday nights normally for us is life groups, but on Wednesday nights you grew up. It's like, hey, it's 6:30. Everything starts at 6:30 around here. Okay, at 6:30 we're going to come together. This is when we do that. Okay, there's a revival. Somebody put a tent out in the middle of nowhere, and now it's a revival. Okay, there's a revival, and now we go out. I'm just saying, we've grown up in a culture where there's like, we know this is the moment. when we're going to celebrate God. This is the moment when we're going to worship Him. But what happens when something's out of our rhythm? When something's not in our normal pace of life? Are we able to engage worship and love for Jesus in every moment of life? Yeah, Jesus had this conversation, you guys know, with a woman at the well there in John chapter 4. And Jesus was telling her something so profound as they begin to talk about worship. And she says, hey, our fathers worship on this mountain. But you, Jesus being a Jew, say that we should worship in Jerusalem. That's where we ought to worship. And Jesus says to her, he says, woman, believe me, there's an hour coming when neither on this mountain nor Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you don't know, we worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But the hour is coming and is now here when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father is seeking such people to worship Him. God is the Spirit, and those who worship Him must worship Him in spirit and truth. Okay, hear me here. Listen to this. The woman is saying, hey, the discussion is about where we should worship. You say we should worship here. You say we should worship here. 2020 East Texas. You say we should worship at this church. I say we should worship at this church. Okay? And then how we worship. The rest of the conversation is about how we worship. And Jesus says, listen. There's a time coming and is right here. He's referring to Himself right now. Here's the moment that we are no longer worshiping here or there, but that access to love God is in every moment of life. That this idea of you've got to worship here or you got to worship there and there's only one moment a week that you can worship is gone. It's standing right in front of you. Jesus says, look, if you can just see me, you can get that it's not about here or there, it's about everywhere. And I'm right here. And so in that revelation there, it's that Jesus can be loved and worshiped in every moment of our life. If we can see Him. Because if you can see Him, you can worship Him and you can love Him. And there's so many times when Jesus is not in our routines. He's not in the places that we most expect Him to be worshiped. Sometimes He's lounging around the couch. Sometimes He's hanging out with friends. Sometimes He's just there. But if we can see Him for who He is, it will elicit a response from us to worship Him. So in cultivating a lifestyle of worship, we must break out of religious paradigms that keep us focused on the where and the how of worship. And realize that the when of loving Jesus and worshiping Him is always. As long as we can see Him, as long as we can find Him in what we're doing, we can worship Him. And hear me, this idea comes from this. It's that when Jesus came and tore the veil, there was no separation between this is secular, this is spiritual. I mean, it's all spiritual. The raising of your children, mothers, hear me out. That time at home with your children, fathers too. You need to be at your home raising your children as well. It's not, we go to church on Sunday and Kirsten's going to teach our kids how to hear the voice of God. Kirsten's going to teach our children how to worship Him. This time at home is a time, if you can find Jesus in it, where He can be loved and worshiped. Your place at work, it's only secular if you believe it's secular. It becomes absolutely spiritual when you believe it's spiritual. And when you start looking to find Jesus outside of your normal rhythms, and you say, Jesus, where are you in this? If I could just see you, I would know how to pour out my love and affection on you at my work. If I could just see you for who you are. One thing I see in this passage that's so important for us to realize is that there is no expression of love and worship for Jesus that's too extravagant. There's no way that you could express your love for Him in too extravagant of a way. Because He's worth it. He's worth it. And you know, here's what God wants from us. Because you may be here this morning and you think, well, I don't have my year's salary saved up that I could pour on Jesus. Or you look at what you can give Jesus and you say, that's not worth it. I see Jesus, James. I hear you, and I've seen his intrinsic value, and it's beyond what I could ever give. And I just want you to realize that the story's not about the alabaster jar. It's about the woman's heart. The alabaster jar is actually just a representation of her heart. And what God wants more from you than anything else is he just wants your heart. He's not looking for you to give him a big gift. And if you give a big gift, then he's going to love you more. I mean, that's just a bunch of garbage. That's not the gospel. He just wants your heart. And I love it because it was broken. It's broken because it's past the point of return. What surrender is past the point of return. And when you get to that place with God and you say, hey, here's my heart. I'm not going back. And it's it. That's all he wants. That's all he's looking for. Don't measure what you can give next to what somebody else can give. Just give what you have, even if your heart's broken, even if it's weak, if it's tired. You say, God, here's my heart. Here's what I have. And he says, that's all I want. That's what I want. Don't touch this woman. Don't tell her to stop. Don't be indignant about what she's doing because she's doing a beautiful thing for Jesus. She is seeing his worth and his value. And she's responding according to the revelation that she has of who Jesus is. This is what worship is. You can live a life of worship. You don't have to wait Sunday morning at 10:05 for Barrett, and we love Barrett, to lead us into the presence. And I'm still working on getting Barrett into my phone so we can hear him every morning, Anyway. One thing I see in the disciples that's so important for us, and yes, there's some motives that are wrong with Judas, obviously. But in Matthew 26, it just says the disciples. It says the disciples were all indignant about what was going on and said, what can we do with the poor? Now, Jesus is not saying, hey, don't care about the poor. That's absolutely not what he's saying. He's saying that the problem of poor people and the need will always be there, and the church will always meet that need. He's not saying, hey, just forget about the poor. Let's just come into a worship service, get lost, and not care about loving our community and loving the people around us. He's saying that this is the most important thing. And one of the things that I noticed that the disciples did is they looked past the moment they were in. Have you ever been in a conversation with somebody and you're talking to them, but you notice that they're talking to you, but they're looking past you at what else is going on behind you, or another person that's in the room or something like that? How many of you have been a part of a conversation like that? Let's be honest. How many of you have done that? Don't raise your hand. Okay. We do that sometimes. Is we're talking with somebody and we're trying so hard, and it depends on your attention deficit disorder here. Okay, but you're trying so hard to look into this person's eyes and engage and be present in that moment, but something in the future or something else is pulling away your attention and you're looking past the moment that you're in. And I see this in the disciples. Instead of engaging in the moment, they were looking past the moment that they were in. They were using that as an excuse not to see what God was doing, but to create a lifestyle of worship. We have to become really good at giving ourselves to the moments with him. When there's an opportunity to lean in to what Jesus is doing, we can't be distracted. We can't look past the moment at all the other things that we can do with that time, or that we could do with this offering, or that we could do with our hearts. It's like, no, Jesus is here. I want to be present for this moment. And I want to give all of my heart to this moment. Guys, in this American culture, we struggle with this. It's hard to have conversations with people that you genuinely feel their heart say, hey, I'm in this moment with you. But that's what Mary captured. She said, Jesus is here. I don't care what people think about me. I don't care that the disciples, that my brothers are saying, hey, don't get this wild, don't get this extravagant for Jesus. I don't care. All I see is Jesus right now, and I'm going to lean in and be fully present to this moment with Jesus. And there's so many moments in life as we're running up the mountain that if we just stop for a moment and look out, say, my God, Jesus, you're all around me. Look at the people you're loving. Look at the people you're going after, and we lean into those moments with our heart, and we say, okay, I want to be fully present for this. I'm not looking for the next thing or what we're going to do tomorrow. It's like, no, Jesus, you're here right now. I'm leaning into this moment with you. This is what you're doing. You get all of my heart in this moment. All of it, every bit. I'm completely surrendered to this moment with you, Jesus. This is where worship begins to happen. You know, this is not the first time for Mary either. Another time when Jesus was over at Martha's house, right? It's the same thing. Martha's serving. She says, why? Why don't you tell Mary to come over here and help me get this meal prepared? He said, listen, Martha, you're busy. You're worried about so many things. But Mary has chosen the better place. She had the ability, for whatever reason, to just seize the moment with Jesus and give her heart fully to the moment with Jesus. A life of worship is simply that. Look for Jesus in every moment of life. Ask him, Lord, show me. When we were worship this morning, I was just like, God, I want to see you. I want to see you in a new light. I want to see you because when I see him, I know that it will elicit a response inside of my heart to say, wow, you're so lovely. You're so wonderful. God, I want to give my heart to this moment. I want to give my heart to this moment with you. I want to be fully present with you. I don't want to focus on what else we could be doing. I want to focus completely on you. I want to end with this story. This is an old story from, I think, the mid to late 90s. There was a worship leader named Matt Redman. He's leading worship at this huge church, and their church is growing. You know, I don't know how many thousands of people. It's just doing amazing things. He's the worship leader, and the pastor came to him one day and he said, you know, I feel like we've lost the essence of our worship just because of just the growth and just everything that we're going after. It's like for some reason we've lost the heart of worship. And there's a song that came out of this moment because the pastor went to him and said, hey, I just want us to take away all the music. We're just going to go. I mean, they were like, you know, I'm sure they had a band like this, you know, just great, amazing musicians, just great presence. But it was like, no, we've got to get back to the simplicity of it. And they just stopped. No more worship team. We just come in and we just sing a cappella before the Lord. And I don't know how long they did this, months or weeks or and however long it went. But during this time, Matt Redman wrote a song called The Heart of Worship that came out of that. And it's just one of my favorite worship songs. And I just want to read the words to you. The first verse says this: when the music fades and all is stripped away, and I simply come, longing just to bring something that's of worth that will bless your heart. And then the chorus says this: I'm coming back to the heart of worship, and it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. I'm sorry, Lord, for the thing I've made it when it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. There's this magnification that's happening in our lives as we lean in to God, to Jesus, and we look for him and we seek him with our whole heart. We will magnify him and we'll see him. And the more we see him, the more we love him, the more we worship him. And the more we see him, the more we love and worship him. And he's all around us. We've just got to learn to lean in. Seize the moments you have with him and engage in what he's doing. And never be afraid to give him the most extravagant worship that you can. There is no expression of worship that's too extravagant for him. He's worth all of it. Stand this morning with me.